director and a business development specialist. I'm housed out of Eastern Oklahoma State College in the booming metropolis of Wilburton, Oklahoma. And that's in the southeastern part of the state, if you don't know where that is. And you have my contact information here as well. Jonathan Wynn often teaches this class, but our team also helps with SBA disaster response. And so he is on his way to Seminole to do some disaster response work. And Caesar is going to be joining us as well. He's a business development specialist who is in the Oklahoma City metro area. So there's his contact information. And you're always welcome to contact our state office, and we'll get you matched up with a business advisor as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means specifically. So we do have some quick webinar tips. I know by this point, lots of people are comfortable on Zoom, but I always like to give some quick tips and reminders. We will mute your mics through the presentation, and then we'll unmute those at the end for some questions. We will be utilizing the chat feature throughout so that you are able to ask questions along the way. And then I'll pause during the presentation and just kind of take some of those questions. Oh, I see Jesse Paxton is on as well. Hi, Jesse. So Jesse is located in the Tulsa metro area. So he may be working chat as well as Caesar. So you might both of them answering questions in our chat feature today. Our presentation slides will be provided to everyone via email. It will probably be tomorrow before we get those out to you, but you will get the slides. As you note, the webinar is being recorded. We do not send out the recording because some of the information we're giving may change periodically. And so we want to make sure that we're not putting any information out there that's not the most updated information. So we don't have our recordings out, but we do send out the actual presentation slides that are dated. Please be mindful and remember that we can see you even if all you can see is our slides. So we can still see you if you're doing something up, moving around, or doing something that may be a distraction. Feel free to turn your camera off if that's necessary. Otherwise, we encourage you to leave your camera on so we can kind of see what your reactions are as we go along. So a little bit about Oklahoma Small Business Development Center. We provide confidential, and that's really important to each one of us because we've been business owners or we currently are business owners, so we understand the confidentiality need in especially our smaller towns. But we provide confidential, high quality, no cost, so that's key, and we'll talk about that in a minute, business advising in order to help you start and grow your businesses. So we work a lot with startup businesses. We also work with existing businesses on different business challenges that they may be facing. So we are located across the state of Oklahoma. You see those red stars are where we have physical offices right now. We've actually added several over the last few weeks. So there and more to come, it sounds like, in the next few weeks. So we have over 30 advisors across the state of Oklahoma. We do serve all 77 counties in Oklahoma. So even if you don't see a red star in your specific area, don't worry. We have remote offices. We also do a lot of phone and Zoom advising. So we make sure that we can serve the whole 77 counties across Oklahoma. So we're generally located, our office facilities are located in educational facilities, chambers of commerce, city government offices, those types of things. But it's great because we do have remote office locations. We have a lot of banks that allow us to use their offices, chambers of commerce, Main Street programs that allow us to use office space so that we can meet with clients remotely as well. So I told you earlier that all of our advising is provided to you at no cost. We're able to do that because we have seed funding from the U.S. Small Business Administration. And then that funding, it requires a dollar for dollar match. So the state of Oklahoma helps with that, along with funding partners like those education institutions, banks, city governments, those types of things help with those partnership matches to allow us to provide advising to you at no cost. So I mentioned that we have advisors across the state of Oklahoma. All of us are business generalists, which means that we're able to work with any type of industry that walks through our door that's federally recognized. We do work with for-profit businesses. We welcome nonprofits to attend our training, but we do not do advising for nonprofit businesses. You can see that each one of us has various areas of expertise. So We work as a team. If you get one of us, you get all of us. So we can make sure that you get the best advising possible. Here you can see a number of our different areas of expertise. Two that I want to mention specifically: international trade, because a lot of our small business owners think that they're too small for international trade. We have a whole team that helps business owners explore options for international trade, how to enter into those markets, and how to deal with customs issues. We also have a tech commercialization group that helps if you have an innovative product that you've developed or an idea for an innovative product, you would work with our tech commercialization group, and they help you try to figure out if that's something that needs to be patented and where to go for next steps for developing an innovation. We say tech commercialization, but oftentimes these are innovations that are created by welders, nurses, people that are hands-on because they have practical experience in what needs to be done out in the field. We also do a lot of lending preparation, both traditional lending, SBA lending, and other lending guarantee programs. So we have a whole team that helps and has expertise in lending background. So that's often very needed for our startup businesses. So today we've already done introductions. We're going to talk about setting up your business, and then we're going to talk about business plans and questions for starting a business. And then we'll have some question and answer time at the end. But once again, feel free to drop your questions in the chat box along the way. If you're on a computer, you're going to find your chat box down at the bottom menu. There's an icon that looks like a conversation bubble. You'll click on that and it will pull up your chat screen. It may show at the top of your screen instead of the bottom, same icon. If you're on a mobile device, you're going to see 3 dots at the top right-hand corner. If you click on that, it should pull up your chat feature. So feel free to drop those questions in the chat as we go. Remember, you will be getting a copy of these slides, so you don't have to write furiously, because this first section that I cover is fairly detailed. So we're going to talk specifically about organizational structure for small business. That's kind of the starting place for setting up your small business. So you need to decide the organizational structure for your business from day one. There is a misconception out there that we start our business as a sole proprietor and then we grow into an LLC and then we move into a corporation. That is not true. So I want to dispel that right now. And let you know that you need to decide what business structure you want for your business from the start, so that we can start to lay that foundation and your business can grow and expand, so that anytime you change your business structure, it's almost as if you're starting your business over. So we want to start from the beginning, kind of getting those structural pieces in place. If you've already started and you're like, oh, I didn't know any of this information, that's okay. An advisor can work with you on how to make that transition early on in your business rather than having to make it later on. So let's talk about the different business structures. So a sole proprietor is a single owner. You're not required to file with the Secretary of State, but you can if you want to protect your trade name or your doing business as name. A lot of times we see that DBA and we don't know what that stands for. That's doing business as, and you can register that name with the Oklahoma Secretary of State to protect that name within the state of Oklahoma. Sometimes we see sole proprietors use their social security number instead of an EIN. I never recommend that. Always recommend that you get a specific EIN, or some people call it an FEIN. You get that from the irs.gov website. But I always recommend that you get that so it has its own identity. Excuse me. So you do have unlimited liability in a sole proprietor. So that means that your personal assets and your business assets are all tied together and cross-mingled. Excuse me. There are some ways to create some separation, but generally if someone wants to bring suit against you, they can bring a suit against the business and you as an individual all at the same time. So there's no separation between you as a person and the business as an entity. So the sister structure to a sole proprietor is a partnership, and that's when you have 2 or more people that go into business together. There is no limit to the number of partners you can have, but a lot of times in Oklahoma, we see businesses set up as a general partnership. If you decide to go into business together with someone and you're just like, oh, we're going to hang out our sign and open up, then generally you're set up as a general partnership, and that means that you have unlimited liability, just as if you do in a sole proprietor. Also, it means if you have a general partnership, that if Jesse and I go into business together and Jesse accrues debt for the business, then I'm liable for all of the debt that Jesse accrues. Jesse's liable for all the debt that I accrue for the business. So you want to be aware of that. You could also set up a limited partnership. I recommend if you're going to set up a limited partnership, you work with an attorney on a partnership agreement so that you can make sure that your partnership agreement is structured properly, because you may have partners that have unlimited liability as well as partners that have limited liability, or all of your partners may need to have limited liability, but you need to have an attorney help you draft that agreement so that that is set up properly to limit the liability. With limited partnerships, you will file those with the Secretary of State, and you will want a partnership agreement. If you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have a general partnership and I don't have a partnership agreement in place, it's okay. Go ahead and get one as quickly as possible. So these are things that you can kind of remedy as you go along, but we want to make sure that you know about them, because you can't correct that mistake if you don't know that it even exists. So the next type that is very common in the state of Oklahoma is an LLC, or a limited liability company. And Oklahoma is a state that's very friendly for limited liability companies. This is a company structure that you will file with this Oklahoma Secretary of State. It's going to cost you a little over $100 to file that. So how does this create limited liability? You have to have some things in place. You can't just file with the Secretary of State and not give you limited liability. That is one step of creating the limited liability. So you want to file with the Secretary of State. You also want to make sure that you have an operating agreement. You can see that on the checklist here. So a lot of times people don't know what an operating agreement is. We're familiar because of television shows and movies about corporate bylaws. Well, limited liability companies don't have bylaws. They have an operating agreement. So once again, you can work with an attorney or an accountant to set up your operating agreement. You can go out on Google and find templates for operating agreements. If you're going to do that, I would recommend that you make sure that you're using one that is for the state of Oklahoma. But you can have multi-member, so more than one member in a limited liability company, or you can have a single member limited liability company. So either one of those are options for you. You also get to decide with an LLC, do you want to be taxed like a sole proprietor or a partnership, or do you want to be taxed like an S corporation? So you have some options with the LLC. So those are decisions that you can make along the way. And if you're not comfortable making those decisions, it may be an opportunity to talk with your accountant or bookkeeper about the pros and cons, because there are pros and cons of being taxed one way or the other. So you can have voting and non-voting members in an LLC. And then the final step that you need to do to make sure that you have separation from your personal liability and your company liability, file with the Secretary of State, make sure you have your operating agreement in place, and make sure that you keep a business bank account and you keep the finances for the company completely separate from your personal finances. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. So another option is to set up a C corporation. So in a C corporation, your stockholders have limited liability. You definitely want to file this one with the Secretary of State. You're required to have an annual minute book. So you have corporate meetings and shareholder meetings. You're taxed at a corporate level for a C corporation, and you can do distributions via payroll or by dividends. If you're planning or you think your company may grow to be a publicly traded company, you want to set your company up as a C corporation. The transfer of ownership in a C corporation goes through a stock sale. So most of my companies that I work with that are C corporations work with an attorney to make sure their corporation is set up properly. Once again, you will need corporate bylaws as well for your C corporation. So you also have the option of an S corporation. So I know this is lots of information and lots of choices here. So with an S corporation, you can have your income and expenses flow down to your individual tax returns. You can, remember, you can be an LLC and you can choose to be taxed as an S corporation if you want to. You can choose to be an S corporation and be taxed and have those your taxes flow into your individual tax returns. So you have to make the election right away. There's only one class of stock in an S corporation, so that's different than a C corporation. And an S corporation is maxed at 100 owners. So this is the Oklahoma Secretary of State's website. You want to make sure when you're working on these websites that you're at sos.ok.gov. If you're at .anything else, .com, .net, .org, you're not on the actual website, and you may see that they try to charge you additional fees. So beware of that. We don't want anyone to be paying additional monies that they don't have to. It's going to cost you about $100 if you set it up. You're always welcome and encouraged to work with an attorney or an accountant to set up your organizational structure. Then an important note, if you file with the Oklahoma Secretary of State, if you're a sole proprietor, partnership, LLC, or corporation, then once a year, you're going to pay $25 to the Secretary of State, and you're going to update your information. And that way, if you make any changes along the way, if you move, anything like that, you can update your information once a year, and it's going to cost you $25 to stay in good standing with the Secretary of State. So I've created kind of a cheat sheet for you here, just so that at a glance you can look at it, and maybe it helps a little bit with the decision making of your organizational structure. So steps for starting a business. These are things that people want to know. So you decide your organizational structure. Then if you're going to be selling a good, if I can walk in and I can receive a good, or if I can get online and I can order something and you're going to ship it to me, then I need to make sure I register with the Oklahoma Tax Commission. If you are in question about whether or not you're supposed to register with the Tax Commission, register with the Tax Commission and let them tell you that you're not supposed to register. If you're going to be doing strictly services that are consulting in nature, if I can't come in and buy something from you, then chances are you're not going to need to register. However, there are some services in Oklahoma that are taxable. So if you're in a recreation industry, so if you do horseback riding, if you do paintball, rentals of bouncy houses, those kinds of things, then you will need to register with the Tax Commission. If you're a photographer and you're going to be giving someone prints, then you do need to register with the Tax Commission. If you're a photographer and everything you do is digital online, then you don't need to register. So it can be a little bit tricky. Your advisor can help you navigate that. Then there are some resources available on the Oklahoma Department of Commerce site as far as licensing. If you're in construction, you're going to need some special licensing and permits, some things like that. Many times we're asked about permits that are needed within certain cities. So you can always check with your local city government at your courthouse or at City Hall to find out if there are special licensing requirements to open a business within your city or your county. So when you register with the Oklahoma Tax Commission, there are different types of taxes that you have to keep in mind. So payroll withholding taxes, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. You need to know about that if you're going to pay yourself as an employee or if you're going to have employees. Why don't we drop in the chat if you know you're going to have employees? Just go ahead and drop me a quick chat message to let me know. Yes, definitely going to have employees, or no, we're going to hold off on that one. That way I can kind of know if we need to go into greater detail. So with payroll withholding taxes, there you have that on the federal side and on the state side. So you need to be aware of that. Some of you are going to be interested in using an accountant or bookkeeper to keep up with your payroll taxes. Some of you are going to use computer systems like QuickBooks or something like that to do. Some of you will do a hybrid model. All of those are fine. It's important that you know that you have to do payroll withholding and that you're holding that money back and not letting that impact your cash flow negatively, because it can become a cash flow management issue. But you need to set yourself up with the Oklahoma Tax Commission and with the IRS to be able to remit those payroll withholding taxes. So it looks like it's kind of a mixed bag. Some of you guys are already planning to have your employees. Some of you are saying never, I don't ever want to manage employees. So it's kind of a mixed group, it looks like. So we will have to pay sales tax for those of you that are going to be selling actual goods, and you will have use tax. So use tax is something that a lot of people aren't aware of. So if I am in Wilburton, Oklahoma, we're not that far from Fort Smith, Arkansas. So I may buy a piece of equipment or machinery in Arkansas to bring back to Wilburton and use in my business. If that's the case, I need to look and see what tax rate am I paying when I buy that in Fort Smith, Arkansas. If it is the exact same tax rate I would pay here in Wilburton, Oklahoma, not a problem. I just need to keep my receipt. But if I pay less taxes when I go out of state to purchase a piece of equipment or something that I'm going to be using in my business, if I pay less than I would pay where I am doing business in Oklahoma, then I owe the state of Oklahoma the difference. That's called use tax. And a lot of times people say, oh, Oklahoma doesn't care about use tax. They're not worried about that. I can tell you, I look at county and city sales tax reports all the time. There are hundreds of thousands of dollars in use tax that are collected each month in Oklahoma, and they have a whole team of tax enforcement specialists that are specific to use tax. So make sure that you're aware of that and that you understand use tax. If you are, some of you are thinking, I'm going to have a sales tax permit, I don't need to worry about use tax. Your sales tax permit can be used on the goods that you're going to be reselling and everything that goes into that. So if I have, let's say I have a product that I'm selling, the packaging of the product itself, the lid, the straw, all of those things, if I'm selling them all as a good together, then those are all things that I can use my sales tax permit for. But if I have a capping machine that is going to cap each one of my products, that machine, when I purchase that, I cannot use my sales tax permit. I have to pay sales tax when I purchase the machine. It's not going to be used to resell. So that's kind of the difference between sales tax and use tax. Some of you may be in hospitality, so vacation rental, hotel, motel, those kinds of things. In some cities and counties in Oklahoma, we have lodging tax that you have to collect and remit. So it's not across the board, those vary. So make sure you understand what your area's requirements are. And if you have to remit lodging tax, you will remit that to the Oklahoma Tax Commission as well. If you're in an industry where you're going to have tire waste, you will have tire waste and recycling tax. I'm just double checking. We do have some questions coming in. Okay, so a great question. Someone has already set up their LLC and they've already filed, and it looks like they're saying, I'm not sure if I made the choice to be taxed as a sole proprietor or an S corporation. So if you have your EIN, it means you have filed at irs.gov to get your EIN. If you didn't elect to be taxed as an S corporation, then you will be taxed as a sole proprietor. So it will flow down to your personal tax returns. So, so that way you kind of know where you stand on that. If you're going to be in an industry that sells alcohol or tobacco, then you have a specialty tax for that. And then you can get a wholesale retail license, and there are some specific licenses that are industry specific, like I mentioned, that are not tax related, but are licensing related. So we've already talked a little bit about sales tax, use tax, and lodging tax, but just to touch on some of the high points here. So sales tax is generally tangible goods. Once again, there are a few services that are sales tax related. If there's any question with your advisor, or call the Oklahoma Tax Commission, or there is a Oklahoma Tax Commission person in your region that you can reach out to. So the state rate is 4.5%, and then you need to look and see what your county and city rates are. So your rate is based on the address where you do business. That being said, let's say you're a food truck and your business moves. You need to be aware of the county and city rates wherever you are doing business. So that's an important distinction to know about. So we have included a link to our rate locator here. So the Oklahoma Sales Tax Commission has a tax rate locator. Understand that rates can change. So you want to make sure that you're checking this regularly. Let's say I have a food truck and I go to McAlester, Oklahoma from Wilburton, and I do that once a month. So I need to go ahead and make sure that that sales tax rate has not changed before I go to McAllister each month. If you're going to festivals and events, then the coordinator of the festival or event may have that paperwork and information for you, or you can choose to remit just like you normally do. So you're initially permitted on a 6-month trial basis, and then that is renewed every 3 years. So your use tax, we've already talked about that a little bit. That's one where there's often questions about use tax, so we're happy to help answer those and navigate that as well. Lodging tax, if you are doing hotel motel, you have to remit those. If you are doing a vacation rental, you have to remit those. Be aware of what your platform will do for you. So for instance, Airbnb will collect and remit lodging tax in the state of Oklahoma. VRBO does not. You still have to register with the Oklahoma Tax Commission and remit zeros, even if you're only working with Airbnb. And you have to let the tax commission know that there will be a third party that's remitting those taxes for you. So there are some requirements there. So I wanted you to see what that sales and use tax rate locator look like, and I wanted you to have the address for that as well so that you'll get that in the email. So some of you said that you will be hiring employees. So some of you have already received your FEIN. You have to have that if you're going to hire employees. I would encourage you all to get that for doing business so that your business has its own identity. It's almost like a social security number for your business. You will be required to remit federal and state payroll taxes and your unemployment taxes, social security taxes. Many times we have companies that work with a bookkeeper or have software that does that for them. It is still your responsibility, even if you work with a bookkeeper, to make sure your bookkeeper is up to date on what the rates are and to make sure that they're remitting them in a timely manner so that you're not charged with penalties. If you're using a software system, make sure that you purchase the payroll updates because those change regularly, and you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date information. You will be required to have workman's comp insurance. So up until about 4 years ago, CompSource was your only provider in Oklahoma. Now you have choices. So I would encourage you to get a quote from CompSource, but also reach out to your insurance agent. If you have an insurance agent that deals with commercial insurances, I would actually encourage you to reach out to 2 or 3 insurance agents and get some different quotes. Make sure as you get your workman's comp quotes that each type of employee that you're working is categorized correctly. That can hugely influence your workman's comp rate. So if I have somebody that works in an office and I have somebody that's out doing construction, if I lump everyone as a construction worker, then I'm paying that higher rate for even my office staff. So make sure you have some good job descriptions on as you get your workman's comp quotes. So you're required to hold some employee records on all of your employees. You need to have a W-4 form. You need to have the IRS W-4 form and an Oklahoma W-4 form. Understand, as an employer, an employee can come in and change their W-4 form every day if they want to. So that's, and when they do that, you need to be able to change and update their information in your payroll system. You also need to make sure you have an I-9 form on file for all of your employees. That's important, and if you're ever audited for that, it's a $25,000 fine per employee. So make sure you have I-9 forms. I'm seeing people's reaction as I'm saying these things. So if you don't have them, don't panic. We'll get them. You can get out online and you can pull down those I-9 forms and have people fill that out and keep those in a locked file cabinet. It's important that you have them behind lock for your W-4s and your I-9s. So make sure that we're getting those for our employees. And you can work with, you want to report your new hires to the Oklahoma Employment Security Commission. If you've never been on the OESC website, they have a lot of resources for employers on their website. Make use of all of those resources. It's also helpful if you have to terminate an employee. They have resources there that can help navigate that process as well. We're happy to help you make sure that you're getting things in place to navigate the hiring and potential termination and other issues that you have to deal with that are HR related issues. So let's talk for a second about the difference between employees and independent contractors. That's also always kind of an area that people want to know about. If you tell someone when to show up, if you provide all of the equipment that they need to do their job, if you tell them where to go, what to do, how to do it, they are likely an employee. If they do what they do for you for other people, they have their own tools and equipment, they are likely an independent contractor. So an independent contractor, you do not pay payroll taxes. They complete a W-9 instead of a W-4. You're required to provide a Form 1099 to your independent contractors if you pay them more than $600 a year. And you can require that they provide their own insurance, and you can request proof of insurance for that. There's a lot of conversation about whether someone is an employee or a contractor. IRS has started really looking at that. So if you have question, you want to work with somebody and get some insight on that, you can work with an accountant, you can work with one of our advisors and kind of work through some of those issues. I would also recommend for an independent contractor that you have a contractor agreement in place about what the work expectations are, that they're not an employee, have some of those things outlined very clearly. I also recommend that you have a job description and an employee handbook in place so that they know what the expectations are. It kind of helps keep things more clean along the way. So you are required in the state of Oklahoma to keep books and records. So you should keep those because A, it's a requirement, but you should also keep it because otherwise you're not going to have the data you need to make good management decisions. So everybody always wants us to recommend a specific system for bookkeeping and record keeping. And I see some of you are having to leave. If you have to leave, feel free to respond to the email that you're going to get. And we can set up an individual one-on-one advising session to make sure that you get all the information that you need. In fact, everyone can respond to the email to set up a one-on-one advising session. So you're required to keep those books. I don't have a specific system I recommend. Why? Because I want you to do what you're going to do consistently. If I tell you, hey, you really need to get QuickBooks, some of you are going to be overwhelmed and you're like, I don't want to learn another computer system. I love to use Excel, or I love to use a paper ledger. I don't care what you use. The state of Oklahoma doesn't care what you use. They care that you use something and that you have good record keeping. With good record keeping, you're able to make really good business decisions. So what do you want to keep? Well, you want to start out by understanding what your bank account is, right? So keep your statements and receipts. Make sure that you're reconciling each month. Make sure that you have processes in place for how you handle cash, how you record your expenses. If you're going to be using a POS system, so something like Square or Clover, Shopify, if you're going to be using a credit card machine that you get from somewhere like Heartland or something like that, you need to make sure that you're reconciling all of those reports back and you know how to use the reports that you're getting to make management decisions. You need to make sure that you consistently record income and expenses in categories. So if I am in January, if I recorded utilities and I included water and electric and gas and trash all in utilities line item, and then in July, I recorded each one of those separately, it's going to be more challenging when I'm looking at my books to compare apples to apples. So we want to make sure that our income and expense categorization is consistent. If you're going to make a change, I recommend making a change where your fiscal year break is. So if you, a common question I get is, what about my personal income tax if I'm going to be working primarily in the business? So you want to make estimated tax payments. You want to do those quarterly. A lot of people tell me, oh, I don't make those until April when I file for my income taxes. If you wait until April, you're likely paying penalties. So you want to make sure that you're filing those along the way. For many of you that are starting up, you're not going to owe anything, right? Because you're going to have all of those deductions and all of those expenses that you're having to deal with. But you want to make sure you're filing quarterly, and that way you're you're getting into that habit and staying on top of that. If you have a job outside of your business, or if you have a spouse in your household and you file jointly and they have a job outside of the business, you can adjust your W-4 to have them withhold more, and that way you're not having to pay in quarterly, right? So you have that adjust. So if you're filing jointly with someone else, or if you're filing and you have an outside job, you can adjust your W-4 to hold more out. So that kind of takes the place of having to do those quarterly estimated tax payments. Okay, so I just threw a whole lot of tax information at you really quickly. I hope it's not overwhelming. Understand that we're available. You have resources through the tax commission. You have resources in your local accountants or bookkeepers. And I keep saying that because many of my business owners, that is not something they love to do. They don't love to do bookkeeping. They don't love to do payroll taxes. If it's not something that you love to do, then you want to interview some bookkeepers and some accountants and ask them about what their menu of services are and what they charge for those services. Many times it's a great investment for you to pay somebody who does what they do so that you can be making money at what you do. So it's something to think about. If you need help deciding how to interview an accountant or a bookkeeper, because they are one of your business partners, right? Even though they're not investing in your business, they're someone that greatly impacts your business. If you need some help kind of figuring out, what do I ask when I go sit down and have an interview with one of them, we're happy to help you structure that as well. But asking some of those questions that we just talked about reconciliation, what their menu of services are, how often they update their computer software. Those types of things are important questions to ask. So I'm going to move on into starting a business plan. I know that our time today is a little tighter than what I normally have for this workshop. So I want to go ahead and make sure I'm mindful of your time, and we go ahead and get through all of the information, and then we'll move through some questions as well. Let's see, the paperwork for my EIN says that I can file a Form 8832 entity classification election. Does it mean it's not too late to elect to be taxed as an S Corp? So Kate, that's something that we would look at with you to see what your filing dates were and how long it's been. You can, even if you have filed a while ago to get your EIN, you can make that update, but sometimes there are some additional hoops to jump through and some forms to fill out. Right now, the IRS is backed up, so they're not doing anything really quickly, but we can help you work through that. Part of it depends on how long it's been since you got your EIN originally. So many of you have probably heard, oh, you should have a business plan if you're starting a business. Now, a lot of times when we say that, or we hear that, we tend to have that glossy-eyed look, right? Because we think of a business plan as this like 40 or 60-page document that's very detailed and it's overwhelming. And once we write it, we put it on a shelf and we never use it again. Okay, as a business advisor, I don't want you to spend time doing that. That is not a good use of your time. It's not what anybody needs. So let's talk about what a practical business plan is and how to get one started and what you would use them for and how you would make some difference, write those differently depending on what you're using your business plan for. So you might use your business plan because you need to go for lending. You may be going for traditional lending at a bank, or you may be working with an investor. In that case, you're going to need a more well-developed business plan that has some research data in it. And we're able to provide a lot of that to you. We do have a research team that can do industry research for you. So you'll need some of that. You'll also need the different pieces for the business plan to be well developed, because a lender or an investor wants to know that you understand the business. They're betting on you, right? They're putting money into your business. You may need it, and you may say, Dana, I don't need to go for lending, but I need it because I just need to get all of my thoughts together to start the business. Even if you're not going for lending, I always recommend that you at least have kind of a bullet point overview strategy / business plan, because A, you need to have something to refer to, and B, you're going to have new opportunities come at you, and you want to evaluate those to make sure that you're staying true to where you want the business to go. So it's sort of your roadmap. But I always encourage people to use it as a living document. So even if you're writing it for the lender or investor, then we take that and do some modification to it and keep revisiting it and updating it so that it becomes our strategic plan as well. So those are kind of the reasons that we have a business plan. So I'm going to, rather than have a big daunting, like here's a template for a business plan and here's all the things that need to be included, we've kind of broken it down to some simple questions, because I feel like questions are not as threatening as this template that you have to have for a business plan. So if you'll answer all of these questions, you will have the outline for your business plan. If you're going to be working with an advisor, one of our SBDC advisors or a mentor, having all of these things in writing helps you get started and kind of jumpstarts that business plan process. So some of these are going to sound really simplistic as questions, but we're going to talk through them just a little bit. So question 1, who are all of the people involved in my business? Okay, this may sound simple. You may say, well, it's just me. I'm the one that's going to be starting the business. I'm going to be operating the business. It's just me. That may be true, but you may also have a bookkeeper or an accountant. You may also have a banker. You may also work with a business advisor or mentor along the way. You may have family members that are offering some type of support, even if it's just emotional support, or maybe they're doing some in-kind work for you, right? That shows that there's some business support. You may also have your insurance agent, right? They're involved in your business. So you may have additional people involved in your business as kind of your business support team, whereas you're the primary person in the business. So think about the people involved in the business, what their background is, what their education is. If you have no experience in an industry, but maybe you have an aunt that is giving you advice because she has 20 years of experience in the industry, you may want to list her as a mentor and talk a little bit about her experience as well as somebody who's supporting you in this process. So think about what, once again, a bank or a lender is, they're investing in you, they're betting on you. So what makes you a good bet? Who all is involved in your business? Then as we develop your business plan, we'll talk a little more specifically about what that relationship is and what you have in place to safeguard the business. Question 2, what do you do? It may sound simple, but when you walk into my office and sit down and I ask you what you do, and it takes you 10 to 15 minutes to explain to me what you do, that's too long. I need to know in a concise way what you do. So it should be, if you're telling me, it should be 30 seconds to 2 minutes. If you're writing it out, I need something concise, kind of a summary to know what you're doing. And then we can get into the details along the way. But if you can explain it, you can pitch it to me in an elevator, right? Then I'm going to be more likely to be interested in learning more about the business idea concept. Now, some of you are going to come to us and you're going to have 15 different ideas of what you want to do. That is fantastic because entrepreneurial mindsets tend to think that way. I would say, take all of those ideas, put them on a sticky note and put them up on the wall. Then look at them for a little bit, see if any of them group together, and then answer these questions for each one of those groups. Because that lets you know as we go forward, do things go together? Are we talking about one business? Are we talking about multiple business? Are we talking about phases of a business? So it kind of helps us start to evaluate that. Don't make any of this any harder than it has to be. Make it really practical. But sometimes you have to get those ideas out of your head and onto paper so that you can move on to the next step. So question 3, who is your customer? Our team knows this is one of my absolute favorite questions to talk about, because when you walk into my office, generally I say, who is your customer? And people tell me, well, everyone needs what I'm selling. Okay, and that could be true, maybe, possibly, but I'm in the business of helping your business be successful, which means I need you to know who can afford your services, who is most likely to purchase your services, where are they from, how much discretionary income do they have, and why do they want to buy it from you? So I need you to know, like, who is your customer? What is their avatar? How many kids do they have? What do they drive? What kind of jobs do they have? Where do they live? Because we want to know how to reach that customer, right? So if you can't tell me then how do I know how we reach them? So you may have multiple customers. I like to use lawn care as an example. I may have a lawn care business, and I may want to target busy professionals who don't have time to take care of their own lawn. I may want to target businesses and do commercial lawn care and landscaping. And I may want to target seniors who don't want to get out in the heat and have discretionary income, but they don't want to physically do the lawn care themselves. So that's 3 very specific types of customers I have. And then I would target down even further. And I would look at pockets of industries that tend to contract for lawn care in their commercial businesses. I would get what professionals, what neighborhoods contract for lawn care, those kinds of things. And I would really kind of hone in on who is my customer. So why don't we drop in the chat? Do you guys know who your customer is? Like I said, it's my favorite question. So no one knows who their customer is. No, people are typing. I'm going to say people are typing. So as we look at who our customer is, we have to know why they would buy from you. So I use salons and spas for an example in this particular thing. So everyone has someone that's doing their hair today, right? Like we all have someone that cuts our hair, colors our hair, whatever. And yet, even in small town Oklahoma, we see new salons pop up regularly. Can we agree that that happens? Right? So why would I choose to leave my existing provider and go somewhere new? Well, it could be cost. It could be quality of service. It could be education. It could be that they do something extra, right? Maybe I get a neck massage with my haircut. So that maybe there's a value add service. So I need to know what makes me different from my competitor and why somebody would want to buy from me. So it's important to know our lane. Oh, well. Okay, so question 5. How are you going to do what you do? So remember, I need to very clearly know what it is that you do. I need to know how you're going to do it. So are you innovative in how you're doing something? Or do you have the equipment and the education for what you need? My very first client years ago, one of my very first clients years ago, came in and they wanted to start a coffee roasting business. And I was like, great, that is super exciting. I love coffee. Tell me what you know about coffee. Well, come to find out, I started asking them all these questions about coffee beans and sourcing their beans and how long they were roasting and all of these things. And they knew about drinking coffee. They didn't know anything about roasting coffee. So my suggestion to them was, why don't you go spend the next 6 months becoming an expert in coffee roasting, and then come back to talk to me and we'll look at what all you need to do along the way to get your business started. So you have to be an industry expert. You have to know something about the business you're going into. So how are you going to do what you do? Question 6, how are you going to get the word out? This goes right along with that question of who is your customer? So remember our lawn care example, right? In our lawn care example, am I going to reach those busy professionals, the industries that want to do commercial lawn care, and those seniors? Am I going to reach all of them in the same way? No way. There's no way that I'm going to have one ad campaign and I'm going to reach those 3 groups of people, right? And so a lot of people say, well, I'm going to throw it out on social media and they will come, right? And so I always explain to people, if I don't really have a marketing strategy, it is like I am flying over the state of Oklahoma and I'm throwing dollars out of an airplane. And I am hoping that one of those dollars lands in somebody's hand that's going to spend it with me. That's what I'm basically doing. So if I know who my customer is, then I can get really specific about how to reach that customer, right? So if I want to reach busy professionals, maybe I need to be on LinkedIn, right? Maybe I need to do targeted ad on Instagram and Facebook. Maybe I need to have a TikTok, right? But I need, when I use those social media forms, I need to make sure I know how to target and I'm not just leaving those ads wide open. Maybe I want to build a grassroots following and use a lot of word of mouth marketing and influencer marketing. But how do I do that? And how do I do that correctly for that specific target customer? If I want to reach businesses, maybe I need to do that through old-fashioned direct mail. Maybe I need to do some cold calls and show up on their doorstep. You know, so the way that we reach those different categories of customers differs based on the customer and based on what you're offering. So I want to be clear about that, because I don't want anyone throwing money away. I had a client one time and they decided they were going to do big billboards, and they put a ton of information on these huge billboards, and they had 3 or 4 of them along the highway. Their billboards were too cluttered. There was too much information on them. They weren't targeted. And so they actually saw 0 return on investment from those billboards. I don't want any of us in that boat. So I want to make sure that we know who our customer is and we know how to reach them, and then we can develop a strategy for that. So it's very, very important that you understand how you're going to get the word out to your specific customers. Understand who your top 3 competitors are. Now, this is a little difficult for some of you. For some of you, you're going to need to know who your brick and mortar competitors are in your community or your surrounding communities. If I'm a boutique in Wilburton, Oklahoma, I need to know who the other boutique owners are in Wilburton, Oklahoma. I also need to know who my competitors are in McAllister, which is 30 minutes away, but that's where a lot of people go for their shopping. I also need to know who my main competitors online are, right? So that's a lot of information. But if I gather that information, it helps me understand my lane better, what my selling points are, what makes me different. And for those other community members that are maybe boutique owners in Wilburton, Oklahoma, it helps me understand the difference between friendly competitors and hostile competitors. So if someone has $50 of discretionary income to spend, and they come to me in Wilburton, Oklahoma, downtown, and they ask me for a specific item, right? I'm looking for XYZ type of jeans. And I say, you know what? I don't have those jeans, but I know 2 doors down, you can get those. My human brain, which tends to generalize, starts to think, man, I can get everything I need right here in Wilburton. And so the next time I have $50 to spend, I'm going to come downtown Wilburton and spend it. But if I, as a boutique owner, say, you know what, you can't get those anywhere in Wilburton. Wilburton just doesn't have a lot to offer. You need to go to McAllister. My human brain, which tends to generalize, starts to think I can't get anything I need in Wilburton. And so the next time I have $50 to spend, I'm probably not going to start downtown Wilburton. I'm probably going to go to McAllister, right? So we need to think about, and as small businesses work in our communities, to develop friendly competition and understand who are more hostile competitors and that kind of thing. So Kate, I have some specific answers for you. She's asking about how we find our main competitors if we're looking at dozens of HVAC companies in central Oklahoma. So if it's okay, I'm gonna touch base with you privately about that and about how to figure out who your competitors are. It's a great question, but I think it's very specific to kind of HVAC. And so I think rather than get into a generalized, I'd like to get you some specific information and have an advisor work with you so that you can pull out that actual information for your company, if that's okay with you. So, so question 8, what could go wrong? Now we live in Oklahoma, so on any given day we can have an earthquake, a tornado, a flooding event, fires, all of those things, drought, all at once, right? Across Oklahoma. So we could be talking about those types of things, and I've had business owners that have dealt with those. So we could be talking about making sure that we have our business insurance in place, some things like that. We could be talking about the hot water heater that bursts within our business and floods our file cabinets, and we lose all of our records. So those types of things. Why would we include this in a business plan if we're trying to get lending? We don't want to paint a picture for a lender about what could go wrong, or do we? What we want our lender to understand is we've thought about these things and we've thought through our complete business and how we could mitigate some of those things. So we need to think about what could go wrong. What would our mitigation be? So we have business insurance. If I'm the key person in my business and the whole business centers around me, maybe I need key person insurance. in this day and age, we need to understand what cybersecurity risks are, especially if we're taking credit card payments, right? And online processing. So we need to talk about what we're doing to keep our information secure. So those are all things that we need to talk through in our business plan so that our lender understands how we're mitigating the risk to them. Because once again, we want to be a good bet. If we're doing a business plan for ourselves, we need to think about those things, because if you think about them on the front side and you have a plan, it makes it a lot easier to recover on the back side. So I mentioned Jonathan is in Seminole today working in disaster recovery. So we know the tornado hit Seminole months ago, 2 months ago, but they're still in recovery mode. If you had a plan in place on the front side, then there are things that you can do to get sales back up as quickly as possible, retain staff, some of those kinds of things that you have to deal with in disaster situations. You know, we've all lived through COVID at this point, and we know that there are situations that come up that we can't foresee, but some of those mitigation opportunities are the same, regardless of the type of disaster. So if you need to formulate a disaster plan that's specific for your business, we can help with that as well. But it's important in your business plan that you think about what could go wrong, how you would be impacted, and what your mitigating factors would be. So question 9, these are kind of the fun questions. What are your top 3 goals for the next 6 months? Now, these are usually financial for most of my business owners. So what are your top 3 goals? And then question 10, which is kind of the secondary part of that, what will success look like? So sometimes people automatically jump to financial success, but what we're really looking at here is, for some business owners, it might be, you know what, in a year, I want to have enough staff trained well that I can take a vacation, 5 whole days off from my business and not have to worry about things. It might look like hiring my first employee. It might look like quitting my full-time job, right? So success might look different for each one of you, but it's something to think about, and that way we can map out what that timeline looks like. So at this point, you want to pause in your business planning and you want to make a quick evaluation. Do your answers to the questions make sense? Do they make sense together? Once again, is this one project? Is it phases of projects? Or do I have multiple business ideas going on here? So you want to take that quick evaluation. And then you jump into the thing that causes most people some anxiety or some heartburn. We talk about financial projections. Now, when I say that to my clients, a lot of times they kind of get this look on their face. I'm not asking you to do anything crazy. Our team can help you put together those 3 years of monthly financial projections. We're trained, we know how to do that. Your accountant can help you with that. Some of you may have the expertise to be able to do that, but you have to have the information to start. How do you start? Figure out what you need to buy before you start. Now, these may be estimates. You might have to jump out online and do some research on, what does that machine cost? If I buy it new, if I buy it used, what are the risks if I buy it used versus new? How long is the warranty? Those kinds of things. But make a list of all those one-time purchases that you need before you can start. Maybe it's a building. Maybe you're going to rent a building and maybe you just need machines to start. What do you need before you start? And then figure out, what are you going to have to pay on an ongoing basis? So this would be your overhead costs, right? This would be things like electricity, water, insurance, staff costs, those kinds of things. Some of those may be estimates as well, especially if you haven't identified a building. You're planning to buy a building, you know you're going to need a building, but you haven't found a building yet. So we may have to put some estimated costs in there because we don't know what it's going to take to heat and cool a building, because we don't really know if we're going to end up in a 1,200 square foot building or a 2,500 square foot building, right? So some of this may be an estimate until we get a little further down, but if we know it, if we at least have an estimate in there, we can start to see if the numbers work. Because once again, we're in the business of supporting financially stable businesses, not expensive hobbies. And you'll hear me say that often if you work with me as an advisor, because I'm in the mode of helping you become a business. And if you can't pay yourself, if all you can do is break even or pay staff and you're never getting anything out of the business, you're running an expensive hobby. And many businesses operate that way, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. My job is to help you transition that into a financially successful business. So then we look at question 13. How does your business make money? And you may be like, Dana, that's easy. I told you back in question 2 or 3, what do I do? This is how I make my money. I sell widgets, right? But maybe you also have the opportunity to do some consulting, because maybe you have 15 years of experience in the widget industry and you could sell your experience as a consultant, right? So maybe there's a secondary income stream there. So let's evaluate what all your income streams are and get that on paper and see what kind of revenue they're going to generate. And then we can put that projection together to see, is this a financially viable idea? Sometimes people have great ideas that are not financially viable, maybe at the scale they want to start out at. Maybe they need to start it at a smaller scale and phase it in. Or sometimes it's something that's not financially viable due to the cost of the raw materials that they need. And so at that point, then we can have some discussion about kind of pricing and what your lane is and all of those different pieces. But we don't know that until we can get some of this information in place. And that's it. So usually when you think of a business plan, it's a very daunting task, but a few questions. If you can answer those questions or do a little research and answer those questions, you have your outline for your business plan already completed. So what are your next steps? Then you want to draft the actual business plan. So you may have given me bullet point answers to those questions. We want to create some narrative. We want you to create your resume as well, so that we understand what experience you bring to the table or your team brings to the table. We want to get those projections in place. A lot of times people bring me that kind of those raw lists, and then we put those into, pretty spreadsheets that have 3 years worth of monthly projections and cash flow and all of those things. If you're going for lending, if you're going to work with investors, you want to make sure that you review your credit report, that there's nothing on your credit report that is false or shouldn't be there. You also want to know what your credit score is, or have an idea of your credit score. That helps your advisor know kind of what lending options are most available to you. And I would always encourage you to work with an advisor. Once again, we have a team across the state of Oklahoma. If it's not an SBDC advisor, then work with an accountant, work with a mentor, work with another business in your area, or maybe a business that's out of state that's not a direct competitor to you, but has experience in your same industry. It's important to kind of get that outside perspective from someone who is not your yes man, right? So if you go around and you ask all of your best friends about your business, they're all going to tell you it's a great idea, right? Because they're your friends and they want you to be successful and they want to be supportive. But sometimes you need a business advisor that's not going to be your yes man, that's going to be a realist and help you work through those challenging issues. So work with those advisors. So if you want to work with an advisor, if you want to work with an SBDC advisor, feel free to drop that in the chat and we'll get you matched up with an advisor who's either in your direct geographic area or who has industry specialization in whatever you're looking at doing. That we've got a question, are you familiar with business incubators? We absolutely are. In fact, some of our advisors house with business incubators. So business incubators are great places to start a business. I would always encourage you to look at the incubator agreement. It's important that you understand your incubator agreement, what you're having to pay, what those launch out fees are, if there are any, because incubators are sometimes set up differently. Some of them are for-profit incubators, some of them are nonprofit incubators, some of them are educational incubators. So there are different types of incubator systems. But yes, we're definitely familiar with those. And our advisors work with businesses that are in incubators and businesses that are coming out of incubator situations all the time. So once again, feel free to drop it in the chat if you're interested in an advisor. One of the things I told you early on, all of our services are available at no cost to you because we're funded in part through the SBA. Just to be clear, we are not the SBA. We're the Oklahoma Small Business Development Center, but we are funded in part through the SBA. The SBA, because they help fund, they like to get some feedback on the services we're providing. So that's kind of how we get paid from you, is when you respond to surveys. So I'm going to ask our training coordinator, Cindy, to launch a survey. Right now, it's a very short survey, take you maybe a few seconds to respond to, and then we can jump into some questions and answers. Let's see. So I will have our training coordinator, Justin, follow up with you and make sure that you get those slides from the business insurance presentation. That's one thing I did not mention. If you are logged on with a name that is different than the one you registered with, or if your device has a name like iPhone, and we can't then follow up appropriately with you. So if you'll make sure that we know what your name is that you registered with, you can drop that to me privately or to Cindy privately in the chat. That is important for us to know so that we can make sure that we get you that follow-up information. So if you guys have questions, feel free to, you can unmute at this point and get those questions answered, or at least get them out to us. Sometimes we have to follow up if it's industry specific questions. Oh, I went a slide too far. There you go. You've got, want to make sure you guys have our contact information as well. And I'm seeing you guys drop information in the chat to let us know if you're interested in working with an advisor. So we're making note of that as well. So are there questions that we can help answer today? It's overwhelming, I know. I threw a whole lot of information at you really quickly. For some reason, our workshop was scheduled a little shorter than usual. So I understand if you have to jump off, you can always email. Once I'll be sending out the email of the slides, you can respond to me and I'll either respond to you directly or I'll match you up with an advisor that's best suited to work with you.
Dana, I think everybody should, I adjusted the settings. So if anyone wants to unmute and ask questions, they should have the technical ability to do that as well.
Any questions? Feel free, once again, drop those in the chat or. Yes, so Justin makes a great point. You can attend as many of our business startup workshops as you want. The one that is, the other one that's offered that's called Smart Start is a little bit different than this one. This one gives you kind of those questions for the business outline. The Smart Start workshop has a little more technical information and is a little more template driven. So, you know, it's two different formats. Sometimes you hear something a little bit differently and it helps things click together. You are always welcome to attend those as many times as you want. We also have a number of other trainings coming up that you're welcome to attend as well, and you can always check those out on our website. Thanks, Justin, for pointing that out.
Recording stopped.
So if there are no questions, that concludes our presentation. Feel free to reach out to us to ask any additional questions via email or any of our contact information that's listed. Have a wonderful Thursday. Try to stay cool in the Oklahoma heat.
Elizabeth is saying she had a question, but it wouldn't let her unmute. Let me see.
I see that. Let me see, Elizabeth, if I can.
Let me see if there's, let me look at the settings.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering, I'm in the very baby stage of growing my business, or starting, I should say. And I have identified some of the who and multiple problems that I think could be addressed, but like, how do you narrow that down to where you should start? Because obviously I'm not going to be able to address them all at once.
Absolutely. So that's a great question because, oh, I'm hearing feedback. Can you guys still hear me? It's an opportunity, I think, really to work with an advisor because you sort of want to triage it. You know, we think of like